Air Force Academy is an amazing place, steeped in long blue line history and brimming over with stories. I'm Steve Simon, class of 77, and I'm here to tell them. This is the Heritage Minute.
Welcome to a Heritage Minute special with Lieutenant Colonel retired Steve Simon, USAFA class of 77 and U.S. Air Force Academy Association and Foundation writer and historian. And now, here is your host, Steve Simon.
Today I have the honor of welcoming my friend and fellow history buff Jack Anthony, class of 78. He and I have known each other for years, including on the road race circuit. We have collaborated on several Heritage Minute episodes and Checkpoints articles. Jack's specialty is the Academy before there was an Academy, what I call USAFA's prehistory. No one knows more about that topic than Jack. So Jack, like me, your passion for Academy history is not based on any academic degree or anything formal, just intense interest. Before we get into USAFA's prehistory, please share with us your Air Force career.
Well, thank you, Steve. It's an honor to be part of this podcast. I'm a 78 grad, and I worked mostly in the space business for 26 years, managed to make colonel. And then when I retired, I did 19 more years of space jobs and a good ride, 45 years in various military, intelligence, and NASA space programs.
Now for this USAFA before USAFA thing, how did that rather unusual hobby get started?
Well, in your intro, you mentioned road races, and I always remember you being ahead of me for some reason. I ran the trails like you did on the Academy, and every now and then I'd run across a foundation or some structure, and I started to ask questions. And I met some railroad historians, and then my passion was ignited. I visited special collections, other museums, and it just kept going and going. And all of a sudden, I was the USAFA before USAFA history guy.
Totally because of your just your interest.
Yeah.
So as I say, more about this place than anybody. What in your mind is the most interesting USAFA before USAFA history site at the Academy?
The one that comes to the top is Cathedral Rock. And your Heritage Minute presentation on Cathedral Rock is outstanding. That rock is a geological wonder, 120 foot tall, sandstone, volcanic clay. But hidden on there, scratched into the clay part of it, are the autographs, the initials, the dates of pioneers, about 50 of them. Bill Arbogast and his students from UCCS in 1992 categorized them. And I've explored those signatures as far as who were these pioneers. And I found out where they lived. And by golly, they seem to like carving their names in the rock. So Cathedral Rock is like a giant sign-in log.
Historic site and a document. So, yeah, and I know, and obviously you were very helpful, instrumental in that Heritage Minute episode. And you told some really interesting stories about some of the people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Pointed to a name. Okay, this guy had a gas station down there. This
right,
guy, so,
right. It was just amazing to take what you could see and then pull on the historical thread of, well, who were they? Where did they live? And I've taken descendants of these pioneers back there, and they've literally touched the rock carvings of the names and initials. So it's a pretty special historical site hidden away on the northwest corner of the Academy.
And now off limits too, right?
Yeah, afraid so.
For, I guess, protection, just more protection of the site. I guess.
Yeah,
I know also it's...
yeah. But they let me occasionally do tours, so I'll open that Pandora's box.
Yeah. Well, it's a privilege to be out there. I know we used to run out there as basics or as cadets. We
Yes,
run out the run to the rock. But,
yeah, absolutely.
Of course, since then, it's not as easy to get out there, but I do appreciate the fact that we were able to get out there together and do that Heritage Minute.
Mm-hmm.
So what else? What other interesting, maybe your second most interesting place at the Academy?
Well, the second most may make people wonder, why does he rank that one so high? You know where the commandant lives, the Otis House, the big mansion, and the cadets have social activities there with the commandant? That started as a cabin built by John and Elias Evans in 1871. And then the Lennox family bought it and expanded it a little bit. And then some guy named William Otis bought it, not the elevator guy. And he eventually expanded it into the, I think it's 8,000 square foot, large structure. I like to tell the story of the Otis house because of the humble beginnings of two brothers who came out west to start a homestead. And then it just kept building and building. And the final owners before the Academy got it was Hester Jane Cogswell, and she wrote a book about the history of Pine Valley. So Otis House is a window into Pine Valley, and that's why I think it's a pretty neat site.
Yeah. And we did it. We were out there not too long ago. We filmed did some filming for a Heritage Minute episode, and I know you loaned me that book, which was extremely helpful as well. So
yeah, great site.
So many cool places out here. Well, one of the places I like, and you mentioned running the trails and seeing things, is the Pioneer Cabin. So that's kind of maybe the most prominent, I guess, if you will, artifact, if you will, item from the Academy's.
It is
prehistory, and it's right there on the trail. So
I would call that my bronze medalist site, because when Earl Douglas gave his land over to the Academy for reimbursement, I guess it was, he insisted that they keep that cabin around, and the Palmer Lake Historic Society backed him up, and it's in fairly good shape, and it's quite representative of what these pioneers lived in. And William Burgess built that house, I believe, in 1873.
Yeah, phenomenal artifact. I know. Enjoy every time I run by there. Just stop and spend a minute or two looking at that. So
yes, sir.
So more to the present now. Of course, if anybody around has seen the North Gate of the Academy, it's undergoing a massive transformation. A new visitor center and a hotel going on. Well, of course, you and I worked on a Heritage Minute episode about that general area a couple years ago, the town of Husted and some of the other things. So. What would you say is historically significant and interesting for our listeners to know about that area around the current site of the North Gate?
Right. Well, the North Gate, if you go back to 1871, was a railroad camp called Husted, named after Calvin Husted, a lumberman. And the story on that was General Palmer was expanding the Rio Grande Railroad and the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. And they needed a place for the workers to live and their families as they built the rails and maintain them. So Husted was a little railroad town. Well, in 1887, the Santa Fe Railroad was built through the area to the east. So they built a little railroad town there, also called Husted, one big happy community. And it eventually became a transportation support center and had quite a few people. In fact, they had a family run a clay pit. There was some rich clay deposits just south of the North Gate, and William Shoemaker and his family would shovel the stuff into rail cars to take down to Pueblo to the Standard Fire Brick Company to make bricks. So clay from the Academy was used to do that. So Husted was a splendid little community, but it also has a graduate connection. Get a load of this. 2003 graduate David McElroy, his family in the 1870s had 8 homesteads sprinkled throughout what we know today as the Jacks Valley Cadet area, and his great-great-uncle, also named David McElroy, lived in the area of Husted. So that was a connection of a grad to the pioneers. And when I researched this and spoke with David, he was fortunate to have some elder relatives who knew the history. So
he was aware of the connection?
He was aware. He heard the stories. But when I got a hold of him, and just because of the spelling of his name, I said, "Are you any chance related to the McElroy pioneers?" And he just about dropped. He said, "Yeah, I am." And so I tracked him down and It's a connection of a 2003 graduate to our pioneers long ago in the Houston area. So when you're at the hotel or the visitor center and you look west, you're gazing upon what was the community of Houston.
Of course, that had another tragic event that baseball Hall of Famer Goose Gossage's relative was involved in that.
Right.
Horrific train accident.
There was a horrible train accident at the train station at Houston. A northbounder and southbounder, due to some signals mix-up, crashed. And Goose Gossage's grandfather was killed in that accident in 1909, August of 1909. And there were 6 photos taken immediately after the accident. And myself and my friend David Hollenbach of the class of 87 went back and looked at these photos, and we were able to recreate the photos today of where the wreck photos were taken. So that was a dark day in the history of Houston.
Yeah, I think you helped us find that spot when we did some filming for the Heritage.
That's right,
Minute
Steve.
Well.
That's right.
So another area that you and I worked with, Ice Lake, down at the south part of the academy, that has a pretty interesting history as well.
It does. Why is it named Ice Lake? Well, because of ice, carving blocks of ice from the lakes. There was actually 3 of the lakes, and in the around 1890, the Cascade Ice Company built some additional lakes, and they would harvest blocks of ice to keep food cold on the rail cars. So Ice Lake gets its name from the ice production operation. They had something like that up in Monument and Palmer Lake. Well, we had that ongoing at USAFA as well in the 1890s. Cool.
Times have changed, right? We're out there
we got refrigerators
out
now.
there Saturday, and there's just a little bit of ice on it, but not very much. So here's one I don't know anything about that you mentioned. There was a fox farm on the academy?
Indeed there was. In 1930s, fox farms in America were pretty popular. We were selling fox pelts to the Russians, and we had these fox farms. And if you ever go to the picnic area that's located south of the FAM camp, that area where the softball field is where the pens were for the foxes. And in the 1930s, there were foxes being raised in those pens on the Air Force Academy grounds. Eventually, they quit doing that, and fox farms are no more, but they were raising foxes there.
Every time I talk to you, I learn something I didn't know about
How do you like
Air Force
that,
Academy's prehistory. I know there's like thousands and thousands of stories, but any other Academy prehistory sites or stories? Like, what are you currently working on? I know this isn't a past passion; it's ongoing. What are you working on now?
Well, Class of 73 General Donnie Worcester reported that when he was an Air Academy student, he knew about a cave that existed north of the Air Academy High School, tucked way back up in those hills there. And I explored what he was talking about, and I have determined, and I'm still doing some research, that it actually was a 1907 clay mine where some representatives from the Standard Fire Brick Company tunneled into the mesa and extracted clay. So it's not a Mother Nature cave, it's a man-made tunnel. Entry to a stopes, the tunnels of a mine. So I'm still checking the records to make sure I got this right, but there is some records to show that he paid $500 to harvest clay from that area from the landowner, and he renewed that lease in 1916. So there was yet another clay operation on the academy. This site is closed up. They closed it up in 1969 for safety, but General Worcester talked about it, and I've researched it. So that's my latest project.
Maybe we can do a Heritage Minute on that.
I hope we can, Steve. I hope we can.
So the Academy, of course, is what, 18,500 acres?
Yes, sir.
Lots and lots of history. So one more question as we kind of wrap this up, maybe get a little closer to the cadet area. So that's, what we've talked about has been more around the fringes of the Academy, but any interesting stories about the cadet area?
Well, there is. The cadet athletic fields were known by the early pioneers as Dead Man's Flats. And the cadet athletic area, which is terraced now, was just a gentle slope that people were raising cattle on. Eventually, there was the Cathedral Rock Ranch there. Well, up just below there's two overlooks to overlook the cadet athletic fields. The east overlook, if you look down upon the athletic fields and really peer over the edge, you'll see three depressions. I have determined that it is the 1880s homestead of Oliver Hazard Bishop and his family. And if you're a baseball player and you're batting, and if you could hit it really, really far over the left field fence, the ball might land in their yard if it's about a 800-foot shot. Our Falcons could do that, I think. Anyway, so the cadet athletic fields are the front yard of Oliver Hazard Bishop. So when you're out there, cadets run around doing the athletic events, the spirits of the Bishop pioneers, and there were other Bishop homesteads on the academy, are watching over you. So cadet area, you have pioneer spirits out there, and their last names are Bishop.
So Dead Man's Flats, that reminds me that there's a lake just to the northwest of that called Dead Man's Lake.
Yeah,
so,
I used to go trout fishing there. They stock it.
Yeah, so is that obviously the same name,
Same name.
Same era?
Yeah.
Any idea where that sounds like a story?
I do. Maybe we'll end on that spooky note.
There you go.
Back in the day, horse thieves were taken care of by the horse owners in a rather swift way. They were hung.
Frontier justice.
And they apparently left two horse thieves up hanging from a tree, and eventually all that remained was their bones. And hence the name Dead Man's Flats. And so moral of the story, don't steal horses.
Okay. We'll wrap it up here, Jack. I really appreciate you coming in. Our podcast listeners now and I understand a lot more about what was here before the Academy, and maybe you can come back and we can do this again on a future podcast.
I could keep talking and talking about hidden gems of history on the Air Force Academy. It's got a rich history.
Let's do that. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Steve.
You've been listening to a Heritage Minute special with Lieutenant Colonel Retired Steve Simon, USAFA Class of 77. The Heritage Minute special is a production of the Long Blue Line Podcast Network and presented by the U.S. Air Force Academy Association and Foundation.
Thank you for listening to the Heritage Minute podcast. If you enjoyed this story, we encourage you to subscribe, share it with your family and friends, and post it to your social channels. The podcast drops every week on Sunday. Subscribe to Heritage Minute on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn Plus Alexa, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Search at Air Force Grads on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and more for show announcements and updates. And visit usafa.org/Heritage Minute Podcast for past episodes and to listen to more Long Blue Line Podcast Network programming. I'm Steve Simon, class of 77, and this is the Heritage Minute.